nobody ever talks about the dog. Okay, I'm going to try to make this quick. I recently went to see the 50th anniversary showing at my local theater of Jaws. I had never seen it on the big screen. I have seen it multiple times, but never on the big screen. There was an introduction at the beginning by Steven Spielberg, and he was talking about how he was only 27 years old with one prior movie under his belt when he made Jaws. I mean, I knew he was younger, but I didn't know. I was like, wow, younger than my son when he made this movie. He said that when he finished Jaws, he was convinced that no one would ever have him do a movie again. That's how bad he felt about how everything went. It's based on a Peter Benchley novel. I have not read the book. For those of you who have read the book, how does it compare to the movie? Is it better? Honestly, don't know. But I do know that this movie is inspired by some true events that happened, I believe, up in New Jersey in the I think it was the early 1900s. There was this shark. Can't remember what kind it was. I don't think it was a great white, but it was terrorizing the people of this area, like where it was up in areas of water where it shouldn't have been. In fact, there's a scene in Jaws where these people are scrambling up onto the pier to get away from it, and it comes after them. I watched a documentary about this real event, and that particular scene I'm referring to seems to have been lifted directly from the real story. There were people trying to scramble out of the water at one point, and I think in the real story, it got someone before they could get up onto the pier or something like. I mean, the real story is crazy, absolutely wild. I really enjoy this film. There's a part of me that feels like Steven Spielberg's earlier movies, late 70s, early 80s. Well, this was 75, but whatever. I feel like his earlier films land with me a little better than some of his more, his modern ones. I really like how natural the acting feels, the conversations that are being had, like with the wife and the husband and the kids in the background. And then just as he's going around the area, talking to different people and all the people around that come up and try to interact with it, it just feels so natural. It all feels very authentic. And that's what I really like about how this story was done. I also like the setting. The cinematography is really good. The score, obviously the score makes this film. And I like how they show little by little as his character, the main character played by Roy Scheider, as he becomes aware that there is a serious problem going on. And of course, the issue that he has with like the mayor of the town, because the mayor doesn't want to close the beaches. It would be bad for business. You see the political stuff getting in the way of safety. Meanwhile, I can't help compare that to the overreaction of most governments in the world when COVID happened. It's just like two polar opposite things going on in these different scenarios. I also liked how when they give you the third act, well, the third act really feels like it lasts more than a third of the story, because what I consider to be the third act is when they go out on the boat. And something that I was reminded of when I was watching this was I had forgotten how long they were on that boat with Quint. I think his name was Quint, and Richard Dreyfuss was there. I had forgotten how much of the story took place on that boat. For some reason, I thought it was maybe only about 20 minutes long that they were out there, but no, it was a good amount of time, because they go out there and it's just showing all the stuff they're doing to try to find the shark, and then just all this cat and mouse stuff that's going on with the shark. Speaking of the shark, I do think it was a good thing that Spielberg had issues with the mechanical shark. I can't remember what he called it. He said what the name was in the intro, but I feel like it was a good thing that they had trouble getting it to work the way they wanted, because what that meant was that they didn't show the shark very much until as you get to the end, you see more of it. There is one particular scene really doesn't hold up very, very well. The scene where the shark basically kind of jumps onto the back of the boat. That was a little goofy and cringe, and that was very obviously mechanical shark. And also the whole lead up to how Quint's death happened felt pretty contrived. Like I find it hard to believe that that would have happened as easily and as quickly as it did. But I remember being pretty scarred by it when I was a kid. But I did like how they had the lead up to the final confrontation. I feel like he did a really good job of giving us a satisfying showdown with this creature. There were some things that kind of stood out to me as they didn't make sense, or just some logical issues that jumped out at me. One was there's a point where someone says that the shark is a night feeder. I can't remember if it was Quint or if it was Richard Dreyfuss's character, but someone referred to him as a night feeder, which made no sense to me because he killed the kid during the day. He killed a dog. And so that didn't make any sense. Like, why would you throw that line out there? He wasn't just killing people or whatever during the. And speaking of the dog, I heard that Steven Spielberg tried to say, oh yeah, the dog made it home. But it is very clearly indicated to you in this movie that the dog got it, because there is no reference of the dog anymore after you see that stick that he was playing with floating in the water. I'd forgotten that the shark killed a kid. That was crazy. Something also that kind of stood out to me as not consistent with things that had been stated before. The main character, it's indicated that he doesn't like the water. He doesn't even like to go on a ferry or get out of his car in a ferry, well, whatever. But he was doing that in the movie. He was out of his car on the ferry. And then when they go out on the boat to go after Jaws, he doesn't exhibit any sort of real sort of phobia about the water that it has been built up in our mind about him. So that was just kind of something that felt like he dropped the ball on a little bit. Another thing that stood out to me as something that felt like it went on a bit too long, and that was that the final act, the showdown with the shark. There was a whole bunch of shooting him with the harpoon, and then the barrels being dragged off, and then the shark going away or going under and then coming back. And this happened multiple times, maybe like 3 or 4 times. Feels like those are moments that could have been shaved off of that part of the film, and it would have not made that section of the story feel as draggy as it was starting to feel, especially taking into account that whole monologue that the character of Quint has, which goes on for a little bit. They're having this moment, they're talking, it's at night and they're drinking and everything, and he was really drunk when he did this. And that's a pretty substantial moment in the film. So that was already long enough, that part. And to have so much other stuff that was going on that felt or was feeling to me a bit repetitive, it probably could have benefited from shaving off some of those moments, like maybe 5-10 minutes of the film, because this is more than 2 hours long. I think does it clock in at 2 hours and 5 or 2 hours and 15? It's on up there, but those complaints are pretty minor as a whole. This is a really good movie. It's just one of those classics that you really must watch if you love cinema. Maybe you'll feel like it's been built up so much in your mind. When you watch it, you might think it's overrated. Like my daughter saw Halloween and was bored. What? But this is a really solid Spielberg movie, and the behind the scenes stuff about what went into the making of this is really interesting. In addition to the true story, if you can ever find a documentary about the true story that inspired this movie or inspired the book or whatever, I highly recommend it. It's very interesting. Kind of like the Ghost in the Darkness stuff. That true story was crazy and very interesting as well. For now, that's all I wanted to say about Jaws 50th anniversary. If you haven't seen it on the big screen, you're missing out. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm sure by now most of you have already seen it, but I just wanted to share my thoughts about it. I've never done a review for Jaws before and felt appropriate. All right, that's it for this one, you guys. Bye.